Hello, I'm Liselle Sambury. I am a traditionally published author, and welcome to this writing craft video. I'm trying to do more writing craft videos to share kind of some of my processes in my writing, and this one is all about how to create compelling characters. So what I'm going to be sharing in this video is the process that I use to create characters and to ideate characters before I start drafting. So this is a pre-drafting process. This is actually one of the very first steps in my process because I like to start with character before going into plotting my story. And so that's what the process is going to be that I'm going to be talking about today. Again, this is just my process that I'm sharing. This doesn't have to be the process. This isn't the only way to create compelling characters, and you can feel free to kind of take away from the process what you find helpful to yourself and to leave off things that you don't find helpful to your process and to your writing. And so that's what this is all going to be about. I am going to try and make this as close to my real process as possible. So I am going to be starting with a story premise, which is usually where I begin with this process. I have a little notes app thing where I write down all of my ideas for stories, and usually when I'm starting with a story, I basically go through my notes app and I kind of see any story ideas that I've kind of been thinking about more lately or that I'm feeling passionate about, and I start with that premise, and then from that premise I decide on my main character, and that's where I fill out my little character sheet that I have. So the character sheet that I'm going to be using, I have a link below in the description that includes not only a PDF cheat sheet of this video so that after you watch this video and you listen to me explain everything, if you are going into your writing process, you can look back at that cheat sheet, just have a really quick reference for what was said in the video. And then I also have a Word document which has the sheet with all of the elements in it that you can then take and fill out as needed, or copy and paste the elements into Scrivener, whatever word processor that you use. I have both of those available in the description. And you can click on those links. I do recommend watching the video first and then using those resources because it might be somewhat confusing to just go in and use the resources without the video to kind of help guide you through. So that's basically everything you need to know before we jump into this. And now we can go ahead and get started. In order to, as I said, replicate my character creation process as much as possible, I'm starting with a story premise. So this is a real note that I jotted down in my notes app as a real idea for a story. Obviously, now that I'm sharing it with you, it is highly unlikely that I'm going to make this into a real story. I already thought it was kind of unlikely because my book coming out in 2023 features a house and ghosts and that sort of thing, and so I don't think I'm going to write another book about a house and ghosts. So I figured that this was great for using as an example. So this premise that I've noted down, it has a mix of a little quote and then it goes into an explanation. So the quote is, "It is not a pleasant existence to be a ghost who is afraid of other ghosts trapped in a house full of them. Furthermore, being dead is very boring." And so this is from the POV of a ghost girl who does the least amount possible to try and scare those who come to a house. When she makes friends with a young child who becomes possessed by one of the ghosts, she'll have to do her very best to combat her fear in order to help her friend. So essentially this little premise thing is just like a quick log line. Because for me, in order to go into this character creation process, I do need to have something of an idea of what this story is going to be about. And that's what these little premise markers that I do give me. And so if you're starting in this process, you probably have something of an idea of what you want the story to be about. And so this character creation process actually begins with having that premise and knowing in some point, even if it's a short paragraph, what your story is going to be centering around. And now I will introduce you to the character outline that I'm doing. I have put a little thing on the side of the screen if you want to keep track as I go through the different parts of the sheet that way, to see things in order. That's what you can do. So this character outline I created using a mix of elements from Story Genius by Lisa Cron and Save the Cat Writes a Novel by Jessica Brody. I will have both those books linked below. And so I've basically taken bits and pieces of both of the books, mostly Story Genius, and I've used them to create this character sheet. And so this is a sheet that I fill out for my main character and the major supporting characters. I don't fill this out for every single character because honestly it would be exhausting, and a lot of minor characters don't need to have this much detail / don't need to have a fully realized arc. This for me creates a very firm base on which to go forward with my characters. And it's also nice because when I'm referencing back to the sheet, I'm not digging through a bunch of different questionnaires and answers and things like that. I have a very sort of succinct outline to look at and to help me reference the character. So just so I'm gonna read out everything that's on the sheet, just if you're visually impaired and you can't see the graphic on the screen. So the elements of the character sheet in order are the lie, want, need, effect on home life, effect on school / work life, effect on relationships, shard of glass, quirks, connection to MC, and additional notes. So I am going to fill out this sheet based on the premise that we talked about earlier. And as I fill out the sheet, I will explain what each of the elements is about. I think that's going to be the best way to do this because I don't want to explain them all and then go to the example and then have you forget everything. I think it's better to explain it as I go along. And if you want to follow on the screen, it will highlight whatever section we're talking about, which I will also say verbally. Starting off with the lie. So the lie is the first section of this sheet, and I do actually usually fill this out first. I don't jump around with this one. But the lie is essentially the lie that the character believes about the world. So this is a misconception that the character has about the world and their life, and this misconception is usually the reason that they are having trouble in their current life when you meet them at the beginning of the book. This is also a reason they're unable to achieve their goals or do the things that they want. And that is essentially what the lie is. Some people will do this as the fatal flaw, which a fatal flaw is some sort of flaw that the character has that performs the same function. It's the reason that they're having trouble in the beginning of the book. It's the reason that they're unable to get the things that they want. I like doing the lie, because it has, well, fatal flaw has a very strong value judgment, but also fatal flaw tends to make me think of a character trait, like they're indecisive or they're clumsy or, you know, things like that. I like that the lie makes you think very specifically about a sort of misconception of life that they have. And so it's positioned in a little bit of a different way, but I like it because I find that it tends to say more about the character than saying something like their fatal flaw is that they're indecisive. So that's why I like using the lie. So for this character, based on the premise that I've outlined, I've decided that the lie is the strong always beat the weak. And yes, I couldn't remember that on my own. I had to look. So that's the lie that she believes about the world, is that the strong always beat the weak. And so from there in the sheet, I'm going to go to the want section. So we're still going in chronological order in this case, but there's a reason that I go to the want right then, because I want to know what this character wants to do, because I'm aware that the lie that they believe is what is preventing them from doing what they want to do. And also what they need to do. But I'd like to start with the want there. So I will go ahead now into the want section. So this is what the character wants. This is usually externally motivated and related to the plot. So in this case, what the character wants is to help save a young child from ghost possession and having his whole family killed. So he's a young boy. I decided that at some point. So essentially that's what she wants to do. So it's related to the external goal. It says a little bit more about the plot because in that moment, I kind of decided, okay, so the boy is possessed and we want to save him from that. But can we add something a little bit more? And so that's where I added, help save his family from being killed, just to up the stakes a little bit. These are the sort of plot things that I start thinking about when I do this sheet. And that's why it's really helpful. Even though I'm starting with a character, I am still thinking about plot things at this point. So that's the want of the character. And so at this point, I will jump. So I will jump to the shard of glass. And I usually end up doing it in this order just because this is the way that my mind goes. You can do this sheet in any order you want, but I will tell you the reason I jumped to this next. So the shard of glass is essentially whatever happened to the character to make them believe the lie. So it is the origin of the lie that they believe. They previously did not believe in this lie. This shard of glass moment happens, and now this is a lie they believe. This is their new worldview. And so I jump here because once I know what the lie is and once I know what the character wants to do, I want to start to think more about what happened to make them believe the lie, and be unable to achieve that thing that they want. So in this case, what I decided on, and this is going to be semi-disjointed because these are really like notes I jot at this point. So they don't have to be perfect. They don't have to be super like polished, but this is what I have. So I have her family was attacked in the house where she lived at some point, and she and her little brother were hiding together, and she was supposed to look after him as the older sibling, and she wasn't strong enough to protect him. So he was killed first and she was killed after. And then the man who killed their family was shot by police. He also died in the house, so he's also a ghost in the house. And he continues to assert his power over others in the house that live there. So she remains afraid of him and unable to do anything to help others, just like with her brother. And at this point, I realized the plot hole of, wait, so if her family also died in the house, are they also stuck in the house? And so I added, she's the only one stuck in the house, not the rest of her family, and she feels divinely punished for not being able to save her brother because she was too weak, and she thinks that's why she's stuck there while they have moved on to whatever next point in life it is. So I put this shard of glass together because it fits with the lie that she believes. So she tried to save her brother, and she was too weak to do so. And so she was like, okay, yeah, the strong always defeats the weak, but to add on to that and just to like make it that much bit stronger and to push it more, not only that, but this man who was the strong person that defeated her being weak, he also continues to exist in her afterlife, and he continues to exert his strength over the weak. And so that way, this lie that she believes is being continuously reinforced by the source of where she started believing it continuing to exist in her life and continuing to exert power over her. And so that's basically the origin story I created. You have a lot of space with whatever shard of glass origin story you create, as long as it is the reason that this character believes their lie, and that it's kind of compelling enough and like believable enough as to why this might change that person's entire worldview. It obviously doesn't need to always be this dramatic depending on the genre of book that you are looking at, but that's like a big part of it. The great thing also about the shard of glass is that then once you have kind of decided what this origin is, it can kind of be a natural mystery in your story. You can naturally build up to revealing this shard of glass. That's something that I do a lot in my stories, just because I find it's kind of a natural plot element, is that I will try and like build up and have breadcrumbs leading to the reader discovering that this is what happened to the character, and this is kind of the reason that they are like this, they are the way they are, and this is kind of what they're trying to overcome. You don't necessarily always have to reveal the shard of glass. There may be a character that you have and you just like never reveal why they are the way that they are. It's kind of just dependent on how you're going to craft your story. I just find that in the case of like a main character, you usually will kind of end up revealing what this is because it's a big part of the character, and usually readers will kind of want to know why they are that way. And so that's the shard of glass. And so now that I've filled out the shard of glass, I have more backstory about the character, I have more to work on. Then I will jump back to the need section. So what the character needs. So this is the difference between kind of want and need. So what the character wants is what they think will fix the issues that they're having in their life. So if they do this thing, their life will improve somehow, or things will be better for them. And so they want to do it, or it'll get them out of a poor situation. There can be all sorts of reasons, but essentially the want is the character's way of fixing their problems. And the need is what the character actually needs to do to fix their problems and to improve their lives. And so this is often internally based. So it's based on the character's internal conflict. So for this character, the need that I've written is that she needs to discover that strength is not only measured by physical prowess, and those considered weak have the ability to rise up with hidden strengths. So that's what she needs to realize. And so essentially the need is the truth. So it is the truth about the world that is in direct conflict with the lie that they believe. Assuming you are doing a positive, well, no, not even assuming you're doing a positive character arc, because if you're doing a negative character arc, it's still helpful to know what the character needs, because then in the case of the negative arc, you're not having them reach that point, because things are going to get worse for them. They're going to believe the lie even more in a negative character arc. But in a positive character arc, this thing that they need is what you are wanting them to achieve by the end of the story. The need could be different things. There are many different ways that you could interpret a truth version of the lie that the strong always beat the weak. There are all different sorts of ways that you can interpret that. For me, when I'm thinking of the need, I'm just thinking of where I want the character to be in the end and what I'm wanting the character to have learned by the end. And so that's kind of how I'm deciding what I want the need to be. And so right from this point that we're at, what I really like about the lie and the want and the need is that you now have a trajectory for your character. So if you're doing a positive character arc, which in most cases most people will be doing, essentially you're moving from you have what the character wants, so that's what they're going to try to achieve, to what the character needs, which is what they're going to achieve in the end. And then you have the lie, which is the thing that is preventing the character from achieving both what they want and what they need. And so just in those three, you can see the entire kind of character trajectory, and that shard of glass becomes a backstory. And so that's why I like using this sheet, because right at this point, we already know a lot about the character without having to do a bunch of questions. And also I like it because it relates directly to the plot. So then when you go into plotting, that will also be easier because you already kind of have these plot points decided for you. So those are just, we filled out 4 sections. So now I will start going back in chronological order, and I will go to the effect on home life, effect on school/work life, and effect on relationships. Beginning with the effect on home life. So the effect on home life means the effect that the lie has on the character's home life. So this is at the beginning of the novel. What is the lie that they believe? How is that affecting how they live their life at home? So this could be the circumstances of their housing. This could be issues that they have at home / with family members. This could be all sorts of things. And so I basically just jot notes at this section. So what I have for effect on home life is that she spends most of her time hiding in the house. She doesn't engage in conflict with others in the house. She doesn't try and help the living, so the people who are living in the house and not dead. And she goes through the motions of pretending to torture the living in order to fit in and protect herself. So these are all things that are happening in the house and at home. So those are all the things that are affecting her home life. So that's essentially what that is about. And then the next is effect on school/work life. So the same, this is the effect the lie has on that person's school life or work life. This will differ depending on what life stage you are writing in. So for middle grade and young adult books, it will almost definitely be school life, versus for adult characters it might be just work life. It might be work and school life if they're doing both, but you just kind of pick whatever is going to be most relevant. Also, I guess in the case of young adult, if they have like a part-time job or a full-time job or things like that, like whatever their circumstances are, you just pick what's best for you. So this might end up being 2 sections for you, or it might stay in being 1 section. So in the case of this premise, she's a ghost stuck in a house. So like, obviously she isn't going to school or work, but let's just suspend disbelief and let's assume that in this story, there's a dead guy and he was like a former professor. And so he has a little school that he's put together for the children in the house that he like does. So let's just assume that so that we can fill out this section. So what I have in here is afraid to draw attention to herself, so she doesn't speak in class or answer questions despite knowing the answers. Sees a bully tormenting a classmate and she doesn't intervene. Those are the only 2 things I have. You can add more things, but essentially, again, these are all coming back to the lie. So she believes that the strong always defeat the weak, so she is doing what she can to try and be avoidant of coming into contact with strong individuals, so that she isn't kind of put into a situation in which she's going to be quote unquote defeated again. And then finally, the effect on relationships. So this is more general is how I think of this. So more generally, their effect on relationships as a whole versus with specific characters, though sometimes I will use this to write in a note about their relationship with a specific B-plot character and how the lie affects that relationship. So the B-plot character is a thing from Save the Cat, and so it is essentially the character who is going to help your main character discover that the lie is false. So they're going to kind of help them build up and realize what they need. So that's kind of the function of the B-plot character. They can be all sorts of different things. They can be the love interest. Often the love interest is the B-plot character. They can be a teacher, a family member, a friend, what have you. So in this case of this story, I decided that the B-plot character should be the little boy, just because in the case of this story, she is overcoming her fear to help him. So it made sense for me to have him be the B-plot character. But it could have technically been, for example, the teacher, or it could be some other dead ghost in the house, or it could be one of the other living characters, things like that. But I've just decided for the purposes of this story that that would probably be the best B-plot character. So, effect on relationships. So struggles to form friendships because she has little loyalty due to fear. So, you know, if you make friends with someone and you're so afraid that like if they're in trouble you will 100% dip on them, you're probably not going to have a super strong friendship. So that's why I've put that in there. She avoids people who remind her of her family, and she's also a people pleaser. So she tries to kind of find ways to be appealing to people, in order to be liked, in order to protect herself from being taken advantage of by strong people. So that's what I've added in there. And then for the B-plot character connection, avoids being close with little boy because he reminds her of her brother and she knows she can't help him. So that's the connection to the B-plot character. So that is what is that is how the lie is affecting their relationship. So again, these are all jotted points. You can change these later. You can decide on different things. And these are really as long as it makes sense to you based on the lie. And you can kind of explain why that behavior makes sense based on the lie. Or you can think about it in your head. You don't necessarily need to explain it in the sheet. But you can, as I said, you can switch things around. You can change things as things become more relevant. But what I really like about these 3 sections, these effects on home, work, and relationships, is that this is essentially your setup for the story. So when you begin the story and you start your setup, you're wanting to show what the character's life is like at the beginning of the story. And the character's life is usually kind of messed up or problematic because of this lie that they believe affecting their life. And so all these things that you've jotted down, these are all things that you can explore in the first act to introduce the character. And next we're going to go into quirks. So quirks is a very loose term that I'm using in this case. So quirks meaning kind of distinct things about the character, distinct personality traits or habits or things that they do. And this is also based on the lie that they believe. So these are things, these are personality traits, these are bits of their life and their expression of themselves that are a result of the lie that they believe. So I'm always kind of tying it back to that, the lie they believe section. And what I like the most about quirks is that you'll see as I go through, this is the reason I don't have to fill out personality questionnaires for my characters, because once you understand the lie that your character believes, you can fill out a bunch of quirks. You can think of a bunch of different quirks, and those end up becoming the sort of things that might have come out in a questionnaire. So I'll go through the examples and that will hopefully help you understand better. So quirks, she always knows a good hiding place because she's always having to hide. She has really sharp hearing for guessing threats. She is standoffish. I want to talk about this bit because I want to talk about my thought process here. So personality-wise, for someone that's considers themselves weak and is very scared of the strong, where my mind immediately went is a character who is meek, who is scared, who is very quiet and keeps to themselves, because that is the first thing that comes to mind for me, at least when I'm thinking of a character who is very scared of strong people asserting themselves against them. And then this is where, when I'm creating characters and I'm trying to create compelling characters, I had this initial thought of what this character would look like, and I realized that that was really expected. And so instead, I decided to do the opposite as a way of being unexpected. So I said that she's standoffish. So in this way, she's still believing the lie of the strong defeat the weak, but this ties into she's standoffish because she's trying to seem stronger than she is as a form of protection. How can she be standoffish and also a people pleaser? This also creates an interesting character dynamic because I have to think about that. I have to think of, how could she be a people pleaser but also be standoffish? And in this case, I'm like, she's standoffish to other people to appear stronger than she is, but she's still a people pleaser because she's still doing things for the people who are stronger. She's still appealing to them in some way. So in the case of We Know, because we've talked about her effect on home life, we've talked about how she goes along with scaring the living, even though she doesn't want to, in order to protect herself and to seem like she is fitting in. So she's standoffish in that way, in that she's trying to appear tougher than she is, but she's still being a people pleaser because she's still doing things she doesn't want to do in order to please others and to fit in and to protect herself. So these are all the things that you kind of can start thinking about as you're constructing your character, as you're deciding these different things. And so that thinking of what first comes to mind for a character, in that being shy and meek, and then doing the opposite, is a tactic that I'll sometimes use with characters in order to basically create a situation in which I am not doing the expected thing, I'm doing something unexpected, and therefore having opportunities to make a character that's more complicated and more original by doing something different. You have to think about it more, but that's to me like the fun part of creating characters, is you have to think about it more. And so next on that, being standoffish, another quirk, acting more tough on the outside than she is on the inside. And then I added more kind of like physical quirks. So nail biting because she's nervous and she's scared all the time. Sweaty, so she's frequently sweaty because she's so scared all the time of, you know, having someone strong basically taking advantage of her. And this is also, to me, a strength of using this sort of character sheet, is that I am bringing everything back to the lie that this character believes and to that character development. And so I can always guess at what my character's likes and dislikes are going to be on a questionnaire, because I'm going to bring it back to the lie that they believe. So if it's who is their best friend, I know they don't have a best friend because they're worried they don't have any loyalty because of the lie that they believe, so they don't have friends. Things like that. Like, you can answer all those questions because you have this base of what this is. And so I like having this shorter base, because then when I go to draft, all these questions that might come up in the narrative are easily answered by thinking about the lie that the character believes, and also thinking about where they are trying to go. So what they need to learn by the end and what they want. So this short amount of questions can therefore end up being a tool for you to answer a very large amount of questions. And then the next one is connection to main character. So this is more for when you're doing character sheets for supporting characters. Obviously, with the main character, that is not going to be, they're not going to write an additional connection to the main character because they're the main character. But say that I was doing this character sheet for the little boy in the story that gets possessed, who she is trying to save. His connection to the main character could be B-plot character. So I know that he's the B-plot character in the story if I'm using Save the Cat as my structuring. He, as another connection to the main character, she is a ghost in the house that he lives in. So that's a very plot, like strict based method of like his connection. And I'll note like all of these things down. You don't have to pick one or the other. I'll note all of these down. And then I will also note, you know, now that I've said he's a B-plot character, I can say helps the main character realize that she has her own hidden strengths that can make her stronger than these other people in her life that she thinks as being super strong. Something like that, to paraphrase. So that will be his connection to the main character. And so I put this in because, like, as you do more character sheets, you may want to remember that. Also, sometimes if you have a twist in the book, you have a character who you're not going to reveal how they're connected to the main character until later, it can be helpful to have that as well, just to kind of remind you. It also helps you get thinking about plot things and how you're going to do that reveal. So yeah, when I'm doing these character sheets, I am always thinking about plot things. And so by the time I finish doing all these character sheets and I go to plot the book, a lot of plot points are already set out based on the things that I've decided about the characters. And then the great thing about that is that the story is moving based on the characters and the character arcs versus me coming up with a plot and then trying to force the characters and their character development into the book, which could lead to characters doing things that are not related to their development, that don't make sense based on what sort of character they are. Finally, there is an additional notes section. This is a huge catch-all. Usually what I'll do in this section is if I've been making little notes about like quotations that the character might have, I'll put it in there. Physical details, I usually add a photo to my character sheet. So I'll go on like Pinterest or Instagram or something and I'll find a photo of the character and I usually stick that right into my character sheet. So I don't usually put physical descriptions in the additional notes. If there's anything else I will think is like relevant to the character that I've decided about them, I will put that down as well. So this is really like, the notes section is a full catch-all of whatever it is that you want to put in, that you want to remember about the character. I do try and keep that section though quite short. I don't want it to usually be filled up with a huge amount of notes, just because I know for me, the more notes I have in the character sheet, the less likely I'm going to be to go back and actually look at them. So I try and keep that short. And that's it for filling out that character sheet. So as I mentioned before, in the description box below, I have links to a cheat sheet that has a kind of short form of explaining everything that I've explained in this video. It also has the example that I presented filled in on that sheet if you want to reference the example. And then I also have a link to a Word document that just has the blank spots for you to fill in if you want to do it that way. And I hope that this was helpful to you, was helpful in giving you an idea of like how I create compelling characters using that outline, using that character sheet, the sort of things that I think about when I'm filling out the sheet, and that is something that can help you, again, take or leave whatever you want. If there's something that you don't think is going to work for you, you don't have to include it. You can do whatever you want with this sheet with your own writing. And yeah, that's it for this video. If you liked it, please give it a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed already, please subscribe. And thank you so much for watching. Bye!